We're not going to talk NBA basketball. Other than to tell you that Steph Curry had 50 points in Game 7. That's clutch. Almost single-handedly carried the Warriors across the finish line as they beat the Sacramento Kings. They'll play the Lakers next. So it makes me want to ask you this question because that's as clutch as they come. Who's the most clutch Vol of all time? Or at least in our lifetimes. I'm not going to ask you to go back and do digging on Condridge Holloway or Gene McEver, whoever. I'm not going to ask you to do that. Johnny Majors. I mean, that's before a lot of our times. And clutch is not something you can really put into numbers and that sort of thing. But Dewey Warren, the Swamp Rat, gets a shout out for the Blue Bonnet Bowl, Rose Bonnet Bowl. Who's the most clutch player that you've ever seen at Tennessee? I'm going to tell you who it is, Caleb. So you kind of one-up me here a couple of times today. You've been on top of it. I'm going to tell you who it is, but I'm going to let you go first.
I have some ideas on who you're going to go, and I will dismantle them when you get there. And so, so the most clutch fall of all time, and I got a lot of names for this, and it's tough for me, but it's Peerless Price. It's Peerless Price.
Pretty good.
Look at how many touchdowns. Look at how many times he scored the go-ahead touchdown in the 98 season, including twice against Syracuse, once against Florida. He had the kickoff return against Alabama to break the game open. Against every ranked team that year, Peerless Price had a touchdown. It's Peerless Price. It's Peerless Price. It's not close.
Okay, so here we go. We've got Joey Kent never dropped anything. We've got Jawan Jennings was great too. The catch against Georgia to beat them at Athens. He was a dog.
Jennings was good.
He was.
Also had the go-ahead touchdown against Florida the week before.
Yeah. Be sure and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't at this point. Where do you think I'm curious? Where do you think I'm going? Jeff Hall, super clutch. So is James Wilhoit. Sorry, that was the message board. Go ahead.
Oh, no, Jeff Hall was incredibly clutch. And I've never asked Fred White, what went into electing him the team captain? I've never heard of a kicker elected team captain like he was in 98.
Neither have I.
But yeah, Hall was clutch. I think you're going to go to, because it's very common for Tennessee. And I understand your point, but I want to dismantle it if you go here. But are you going to go Casey Clausen?
No question. It's Casey Clausen, the Iceman on the road. He wins an SEC championship, if not for mistakes by Travis Stevens, Dante Stallworth. It is Casey Clausen, wins on the road, just that great. I'm telling you, it's Casey Clausen. There's never been a better road quarterback than Casey Clausen. Well, maybe if you want to say T. Martin, just because of winning the championship, winning at Syracuse and what they did in that 98 season. But it's Casey Clausen, and it's not close.
Here's your flaw with Casey Clausen. Casey Clausen, if you need a play and you're in the game, I agree. Casey Clausen. 4th and 19 against Alabama. Like, that's still I still can't believe he converted that. Of course, Mike Shula may have called the worst defense in the history of defense. And that, you remember that defense he called that 2-man rush with a soft zone and 3 quarterbacks and spy? You're spying Casey Clausen. You know he's not running for a first down on 4th and 19.
Agreed.
But and against Auburn that year, there was a 4th and 13. But here's the flaw with Casey Clausen. And this was very common when he was at Tennessee. When it was a back and forth game, he was going to be clutch in the end. If the game ever got a little bit out of hand, though, and you felt it was going to slip away from Tennessee, Casey Clausen could never re-rally the troops. And so to give you an example of that was 2003 Georgia, the Sean Jones 99-yard fumble return, maybe the most infamous play in Tennessee football history. You were covering that game, I'm guessing, Dave, right?
Yes, I was there. Yeah, it was bizarre. I still can't believe that play happened.
I can't either. And because Tennessee was about to score, go in up 1. Instead, they're down 20-7 at halftime. That team folded in the second half. And I'm sorry, that's on Casey Clausen. You don't let your team fold the way he let them fold. They quit after that fumble because they were so demoralized. If you're going to go quarterbacks that I think we're actually may have, that's part of being clutch, staying level-headed when the snowball starts. See, I think Andy Kelly has Casey Clausen beaten that category. Andy Kelly was the guy when the snowball was rolling against you. He wasn't quitting, and he could rally the troops like nobody's business at Tennessee.
Well, no, nobody's perfect, but Andy Kelly, the year before, I believe it was 91, the year before the miracle at South Bend, he did throw an interception late against Notre Dame in Neyland Stadium that cost Tennessee the game. And he admits that he should have put more air under the ball. He threw an interception on the final drive as they were going in for a score. So nobody
threw an interception on an out route at Auburn in 03.
Right. Nobody's perfect. I mean, nobody's perfect.
Yes.
But as far as, I guess maybe that, but then Andy Kelly goes and leads them to a win at Notre Dame. So, I mean, I like,
come back.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Sorry, buddy, but I just think it's Clausen.
And also, let's not forget some of these wins that Clausen gets credit for. Okay, the Miami game. Casey Clausen had nothing to do. The reason Casey Clausen gets credit for that game is because he didn't turn the ball over. That was a Trent Dilfer win if I've ever seen one in college football. Clausen's Miami game. He didn't win that game. The Florida game in 2001. Okay, I know people give Clausen credit, and he was very methodical and poised in that game. That was Travis Stevens. That was Travis Stevens in the offensive line, and Florida could not get a stop. I don't know how Tennessee ran down their throats like they did in that game. But that was all mostly Travis Stevens.
And guy criticized a lot. We have to give John Chavis credit for coming up with the Prowler package.
Oh, yes, that's right. Now, where Clausen was clutch, I will say where it stuck out must have been his second start. They're playing South Carolina. Lou Holtz on the road in 2000, and Clausen leads a late game-winning drive, like a long 14-minute drive or 10-minute drive that was incredible for Tennessee to win that game. So Clausen definitely had his clutch moments, and I've always felt Casey was one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks in Tennessee history. I just felt he had a bad habit of when the snowball started, he had trouble reversing it. I thought it was that way with 2002, the rain-soaked swamp game. He had trouble with that. He let the Alabama game get away from them that year, the 34-14 Alabama game. He let the Miami game get away from him. And then in 2003, he did almost lead the comeback to Auburn. But then he let the Georgia game get away. And then his final game, the Peach Bowl, I mean, he let that one get away from him. And so I just think that it's not the losing. Look, Peyton Manning had this problem too when he was in college. By the way, underrated clutch quarterback. Everyone says he's not clutch. Go look at that SEC title game. But it just seemed like when the snowball started on Peyton Manning, it started. If it rained, it poured.
Well, I have trouble saying that Peyton's not clutch. He's somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's 100% clutch. I think the entire program got tight against Florida, but that'll always hang over him. So fine, let that hang over him. But like you said, I was at that Auburn game, just sitting in the stands, and that was incredibly clutch. It felt like the Tennessee was going to lose that game. So, yeah, I mean, but who would you have other than Casey Clausen in, let's say, the former era, the former post era since that point? You're going way back, okay, to late 80s.
Well, I did say Peerless Price. That's the former era.
Okay, no, you're right. I forgot you said Peerless Price. I'll give you Peerless Price. Yeah, he was pretty good. I'll tell you the other guy that's never considered clutch is Dwayne Goodrich, the guy that went to the coaches, and they didn't have one cornerback that would follow a receiver. Some teams do that. Some teams don't. Some teams like to stay with your cornerbacks on either the boundary side or the short side of the field, and other teams just keep you on the right side no matter what. Dwayne Goodrich went to Tennessee's coaching staff and said, I want Peter Warrick. And Dwayne Goodrich, did anybody have a great game against him in 98? Not that I can recall.
No, not
so
at all.
We don't think of cornerbacks as clutch, but really if you think about it, you have to be the most clutch, because if you give up one play out of 100, that could change the whole game.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're going to go, secondary in general, Deion Grant was clutch. That interception against Florida in 98. I mean, Florida's going in there. That's a touchdown if Deion Grant doesn't make that play. It was slightly underthrown by Jesse Palmer. Yes. But you agree, right? That's a touchdown if Deion Grant doesn't get in the way.
I think it's the greatest play in Neyland Stadium history.
Like, he saved Tennessee. And don't forget the next year. Remember at Florida, Deion Grant got another interception that should have set up Tennessee for a win, and Martin couldn't close the deal.
Should we be talking about Hendon Hooker in this conversation?
Hendon Hooker was, I mean, last year, the Pittsburgh, and I know we know the Alabama game, but that Pittsburgh game, that was clutch. And he was clutch in the Music City Bowl, even though they lost. I mean, we could talk about Josh Dobbs. Let's just forget Josh Dobbs, like in like his second start as a sophomore, led Tennessee back from a 14-point deficit with 4 minutes to go at South Carolina. Then he leads them back from a 21-point deficit against Georgia the next year. Then against Florida in 2016, he has a 21-point deficit that he leads them back from. And the next week, he leads them back to a Hail Mary to beat Georgia. I mean, that was clutch.
I can't go Dobbs on clutch because to me, you have to be knocking on the door of a championship. Okay. At least not. So I'll take Hooker because they were knocking on the door of making the college football playoff. So if I had to rate it, I'm glad you brought up. I'm glad, Travis, you brought up Hendon Hooker, because if Hendon Hooker had a little bit more games under his belt in college, I think he'd be right there in my mind with Hendon Hooker. If for instance, he couldn't go to the NFL and he were playing for Tennessee for one more year, I might have changed my mind. But right now, I'm Casey Clausen, your peerless price. But I think another season, another couple of clutch games, we're talking about Hendon Hooker being that type of guy. He just didn't play enough because of the transfer and then not having the job in year one to Joe Milton.
Yeah, no, you're right. He didn't. I still would be going Peerless though. Again, that 98 guys, go back and look at the stats from that night. Look at when Peerless Price scored his touchdowns in 98. Every one of them was either a lead changing touchdown or one to give Tennessee a one score or two, go from a one score to a 2-score lead against a ranked team.
Well, don't forget the Florida State defensive back was wrapped around him in that national championship touchdown catch. I mean, yes. I still remember I didn't think when that ball was in the air coming down, I was like, oh, he's covered. That's not going to be completed. I'm like, oh my gosh. And not only did he catch it, but he had the wherewithal to get away from me.